Hello everyone, it's Q&A Tuesday. Guys, once again, thank you for all the questions pouring in. I'm overwhelmed and I thank you so much. Without these questions, these episodes would not be possible. With that said, let's dive right into it. First question comes from Ivan P. Can you share some insights on markups on hot and highly desirable models and how you price your watches? What kind of factors go into consideration? It's actually a pretty simple answer to that. We do have a standard market, and that is 5 to 10 points off the retail value. So if something retails for $10 and I buy it for $9, I will sell it for $10. If I buy it for $10, I'll sell it for $11. Oftentimes, that is going to be the standard for about 95% of all watches that come in here. As far as highly desirable models, well, believe it or not, we make less money on the desirable stuff, a lot less money often on the desirable stuff than we do on quote unquote your regular stuff. And the reason for that is because the hot and desirable stuff is a moving target. And usually that's a target that goes up and then comes back down once the demand comes down a little bit. So often what we do is we just kind of fill orders to make a client happy. And oftentimes when prices become super unreasonable, I'll talk a client out of buying. For example, GMT, stainless steel today, that sells for almost twice its retail value. I tell people, wait until the market comes down a little bit. There are more goods on the market. The prices will come down eventually. But if somebody must have one today, I constantly tell them that, look, you're paying all the money in the world for it today. And often I only make 2 to 3% on that particular sale, just because I know that in a few months down the line, when it comes back down a little bit, I don't want to be left looking bad. And even though clients do understand that it's not me that's trying to charge them an arm and a leg, and I myself pay an arm and a leg. For example, the very first steel GMT that our customer had to have, he paid $18,000 for it. I paid $17,300 just to get one and deliver it to them. Not a whole lot of margin there if you consider shipping fees, et cetera, et cetera. But the client had to have one yesterday and I delivered it, and that's that. We based our markups on our costs. There's a certain market price for every watch out there. We buy it based on that to allow us to make that particular margin when it comes to retail sales as well as wholesale sales, because we are a wholesale company as well. So often I buy slightly cheaper, or I try to buy slightly cheaper so that I can both wholesale the watch at a smaller margin and then retail the watch at a slightly higher margin. Now, are there exceptions to the rules? Absolutely. We have a terminology in the business called RIP, right? When knowledge is king, as they say. And sometimes I walk around a trade show and I'm able to rip a few pieces where the market on them is slightly higher and I'm able to make more margins on them. Does that mean I will sell them cheaper? No, I will make a bigger margin because I managed to quote unquote rip a particular watch. I'm not here to give away profit if it's available. But at the same token, we all make mistakes as well. And there's watches out there that I've sold and lost money on. So at the end of the year, more or less still just, averages down to that 10% margin. Hope that answers your question. Here's a good one from Cuba, whose question I answered before. Another question, what qualities do you look for when hiring salespeople for Luxury Bazaar? Would love to work for you one day. All the best. There's a lot of qualities that I look for, and I actually personally still do all the hiring. Vladimir, a gentleman who's my COO, he's also in charge of human resources. He does the initial interviews, the phone interviews, and so on and so forth. But the final interview always comes through me, and regardless whether I'm hiring another salesperson, an executive, or a person to ship boxes, I still do every single interview in this office myself, and I make the final decision whom to hire and whom to fire. There's probably 1,000 different factors that go into hiring someone, and believe it or not, it's one of the most difficult tasks out there to find the right fit for a company. And the reason for that is because we're an interesting company. I come from a corporate background. At the age of 26, I was a VP at Deutsche Bank, and I had quite a few people working from under me. I'm also an Army veteran, so when it comes to procedures, when it comes to processes, and so on and so forth, I'm very big at that within the company. So I always tell everybody when I hire them, is that we're sort of a corporate structure without the corporate politics and environment, replaced by quote-unquote a family environment. And the biggest quality I look for someone when I hire them is that the day that they start to work for me, they treat this company as if it was their own. We're a fairly large company when it comes to numbers and sales and so on and so forth, but we only have 30 personnel working here. So in terms of personnel, we're not that large. So we're sort of like a big family. I oftentimes like to hire people that are recommended by people that already work for me. So if I have a photographer that wants to bring in their cousin to work as an additional photographer, I will usually go that route. But again, to answer your question, family values. treat this company as if it was your family, treat this company as if it was your own. And majority of people that work here are family. They've been here for many, many years. I have people with me that have been here over 10 years and they're not going anywhere. And I pride myself on that because A, I create a pleasant working environment for my employees, and in turn, my employees treat this business as if the business is their own, which makes it for a successful overall business. Here's a good one from Mr. Wiles. Question for your next Q&A. How do you travel with all the watches taken into account the customs and security? Also, have you ever had problems or some explaining in customs with just one expensive watch on your wrist? Thanks. Mr. Wiles, it's actually fairly simple. Contrary to all belief, I don't travel with any watches in my backpack or suitcase, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that goes out of this office goes out via a armored service. So a bunch of guys with guns come in here, they pick up about 7, 8 trunks of my stuff. I get on the plane, and when I show up at a trade show, they show up with all my stuff. I take it out, put it out, and then when it's time to go home, I put it back in those trunks. Same guys with the guns come in, pick all that stuff up, and it shows up in my office a couple of days later. It is absolutely unsafe to travel with the amount of watches that we have. When we go to a trade show, we ship to the tune of $20 million worth of stuff to each trade show. So as you can imagine, it would not be very safe, nor would it be physically possible for me to carry all the stuff with me. Our trunks are probably almost the size of my desk, the ones that we pack and take to the trade show with watches and jewelry. When I go overseas, all the proper paperwork gets filled out. In fact, when I travel to Hong Kong, the report of all the goods that I take to Hong Kong is about this thick, because you have to literally line item every single item that's going out of the country and that's coming back in with pictures, description, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, I have a program that does that for me, but it's a bit of a pain in the neck. When I travel locally, obviously there's no customs involved. The stuff just goes in and out. As far as traveling on myself, I'm insured up to an X amount of money to have a watch on my wrist. And yes, I have been stuck at customs before. People asking me, hey, what is this watch that you're carrying? And I simply tell them, this is my watch. Whenever I wear a watch to travel, I usually wear one of my own watches. So if I go out of the country, and even if I don't put on one of my own watches, if I put on one that's in the safe, if I go out of the country with a particular watch, I'm going to come back in with that same watch, not to deal with customs when it comes to entering back into the United States. When I enter other countries and they ask me, hey, what is that watch? How much is that watch? And I'll tell them it's $200,000. I never hide anything from it. Like, wow, that's an expensive watch you have. And I simply tell them, yeah, I'm in the business. This is the watch I chose to wear today, and this is the watch I'm going to leave your country with. So don't worry, I'm not trying to smuggle anything in. Hope that answers your question. So the next question comes from Rebel Fan. How does this channel not have 50,000 subscribers? Great content, Roman. Nothing to do with watches, but I did want to address that question. I've been doing this for almost a year now. I put out close to 100 different videos at this point. And YouTube is tough. You know, it's not as easy as Instagram. I think I've said that before. Because you really have to be consistent, put out great content weekly in order to get people to continue subscribing. I will tell you this, since I hit about 2,000 subscribers, from 2,000 to 3,000, it took me a couple of months, where it took me almost a year to get to 2,000 subscribers. So it's a curtailing effect. With the help of you guys sharing my videos, telling others about it, I will get more subscribers. And at this point, I believe it should start to speed up. So one thing I will tell you is that my 3,000 subscribers now on YouTube are extremely valuable, because the people that do subscribe to me, they actually watch my content, which is great and which is extremely valuable to me and doesn't make me feel like I'm wasting my breath. So to answer your question is hopefully soon. Hopefully I'll see that 50,000 subscriber mark soon. And if you guys want to help, you know what you can do. You can like, share, and subscribe. Next question from Gary Smith. Roman, please address the addiction we have with sports watches. I suspect it's because the days of gentlemen are numbered and casual dress is more prevalent. It's such a shame, because brands are switching their focus and neglecting to produce innovating dress watches, and Lang & Son and FP Journe being exceptions. Do you think we'll see a revival of the dress watch? I think I addressed this question somewhat in the past when I talked about 36 millimeter watches or smaller watches, which are usually dress watches. And the answer is really the same. Dress watches are not really dead. They're still out there and people are still buying them. It's just something that you don't see in your face, mainstream, on, again, social media. Right now, media drives the sales of watches, and the watches, popularity of watches, or what it seems like. There's still a slew of guys out there that will not put on a clunky AP, that will not put on a big Richard Mille, or that will not put on a sporty watch if you pay them. And most people will say, well, it's probably the older generation. Absolutely not. I know plenty of guys that are in their 20s, early 30s, that are still only go the dress watch route. And to them, a big clunky watch is just A, not comfortable to wear. It's not something that they like. It doesn't go with their dress and so on and so forth. There's still plenty of dapper guys out there that dress dapper, that don't dress sporty, and they choose to put on a dress watch and a dress watch only. It's just not as popular on the media side of things. It's not as popular on social media. And that's what's being pushed onto you and in your face. And this is why it makes you seem like, oh, wait a minute, then dress watches must be dead. Dress watches are absolutely not dead. If you went downstairs into my vault and you look at the amount of watches I have on my shelves in my safe, you'll see that there's still a ton of dress watches that are out there. And trust me, I wouldn't have them in stock if they didn't sell. I just bought a deal of Parmigiani watches. I think there's, I don't know, 70 or 60 different SKUs. 80% of them are dress pieces. I have, what else? Harry Winston. I bought a deal of Harry Winston. It's about 50-50. I bought a lot of the Ocean models, which are the sportier ones, but I also bought a lot of the Avenue models, which are the dressier watches. I have plenty of Langes in stock. FP Journe is just the same. Blancpains, Glashutes, IWCs is on the dressier side as well. Jaegers. So all that stuff is still out there. It's still selling. It's just not as much in your face as a lot of the sportier, clunkier stuff. And I've said this before, and I'll repeat myself. If I am a Instagram influencer, the buzzword, right? And I have 500,000 followers on Instagram, and I am posting certain things day in, day out to get my crowd's attention. What am I going to post? Am I going to post the hottest and the latest AP clunker, which is what everybody else is posting and gets the most likes, or a richer meal? Or am I going to put a plain Jane Lang Time Zone or a Piaget Altiplano, just a plain one? That's not going to get as many likes, and therefore my account is going to suffer from that, because the more likes I get, the more interaction I get with my account, the more the likelihood of somebody like Luxury Bazaar reaching out to me and say, hey, let me promote you. And that's just the sad part about it. Is, a lot of the stuff is driven by social media, but not all of it, and not most of it as much as you would like to think. Most of it is still driven by die-hard fans of particular brands and a particular style of watches that they like. If the dress watches weren't selling, Audemars Piguet, arguably one of the hottest brands out there, would not put out Jules Audemars, would not put out Millenary Audemars, which is the dressier side of things. If they weren't popular, IWC, Jaeger, Blancpain, Glashute, FP Journe, Lange, they would not put out dressy watches. They would make a bunch of clunkers and supposedly would sell. But guess what? If Lange or FP Journe goes out there and builds a watch that's comparable to an AP, offshore, 44 millimeters, it would never sell. Because none of their fan base, none of their buyers would ever go for something like that. They buy Lang & Son and FP Journe for what they are, a truly dressy, dapper watch, and it's going to continue staying that way. Hope that answers your question. Next question comes from a gentleman by the name of Jose Nuji, and I apologize if I have your name incorrect. Hi, Roman. I really hope you can pick my question and answer it in your next Q&A video. There are unpopular models or series, even in the top watch brand. I think those ADs suffer a lot trying to sell them out, maybe sometimes even lose money. I think those watch brands know so well which model is popular and which is bad in terms of sales. Why do they keep on manufacturing those unpopular models? It's actually a great question. If I'm Audemars Piguet, why am I not just not pumping out offshore, which is all that sells? If I'm Richard Milles, why am I not just making to-no shape watches or NTPT watches and not make the big round ones, which are not as hot as the other ones? If I'm IWC, why don't I just produce big pilot watches, which arguably are the most popular? If I am Rolex, why am I producing 36 millimeter Datejust or 31 millimeter ladies watches, which are not as popular, say, at the 38 or the 40 millimeter? Why am I just not producing GMTs and subs, which is all that sells? Well, the answer is really simple. There's an ass for every seat. Audemars Piguet knows that their offshore and the Royal Oak line is the #1 selling line out of their lineup, but yet they still produce highly complicated and less complicated Jules Audemars and Millenary Audemars, and they also made Edward Piguet back in the day, which wasn't the hottest seller. And the reason for that, it's called variety. Remember, these companies have been around for hundreds of years, and they've grown a fan base going back a long, long time. And out of that fan base, you have a percentage that likes clunky sporty watches. They have a percentage that likes dressy watches. They have a percentage that likes oval-shaped watches in case of Audemars Millenary. And they still have to satisfy the one client that doesn't care for a clunky 44 millimeter watch, but wants to put on a 38 millimeter dress watch. They still have to oblige to even dealers who may have a client base that only goes for dressier watches. There's dealers out there that couldn't get rid of an offshore because they don't have the clientele for it, because they happen to have clients that like dressier stuff. In order to be a full-fledged watch brand. You can't make one thing and one thing only and then change it to the market. First of all, it's extremely difficult to gauge the market, what's going to be popular today versus next year, right? So if today offshores are super duper popular, they can't foresee that in a year from now, let's say around 50 millimeter watch is going to be popular, so they're going to switch their gears and make all that. Watches take time to develop, new models take time to develop, there's research, there's development, there's horological things that need to get through in order to make specific models. We're talking about more complex stuff, and you can't really gauge the market. The way you gauge the market is by making certain models. So if company A goes out and makes 5 different lines within their brand, one is going to be most popular, one is going to be least popular. You can't have every single line within the brand popular. It's just not possible because they would be different, assumingly. So even guys like Richard Mille and Rolex and AP, which are the hottest today, they still have, quote unquote, a bunch of dogs, as people or ADs would call them, that is more difficult to sell. But the key word is more difficult to sell, not hard to sell. These things still sell. So the ADs may have to discount a lot more in order to sell versus some of the hottest stuff, right? Do ADs sometimes lose money on a particular watch just to get rid of it? Absolutely, so do I. So does every watch dealer. It's absolutely normal. And oddly enough, it doesn't just have to do with the actual model itself. It has to do with the deal on the client base. There's watches sometimes that sit in my safe that I can't get rid of for the life of me. I'll go and wholesale them to another dealer, and he'll sell it in about 30 seconds because he happens to have a client for that type of a watch. In terms of losing money, and I talked about this before when it comes to Rolex, so if I receive 10 stainless steel Daytona, 10 Presidents, and 20 Pearl Masters, which are very hard to sell because they're expensive in retail, yes, I will lose some here, I will gain some here, but overall I will make a profit across the entire line. So to answer your questions, you're going to continue manufacturing those quote-unquote unpopular models or less popular models to stay diverse. If Audemars Piguet was a company that only made a Royal Oak chrono or a Royal Oak offshore chrono, they would not be a successful company and a true powerhouse. A true powerhouse makes a diversified lineup of watches that will tend to everybody's need. And if today sportier watches are popular and dressy watches are less popular as deemed by the media of what you see out there, then by all means, they're going to continue making those, but they're going to adjust their numbers. They will make less jewels versus more Royal Oaks, et cetera, et cetera. Although that's not always necessarily true. Oftentimes what they'll do is they'll make less of the popular model to create a bigger hype and a bigger demand, therefore raising the brand image. And when that happens, even the less popular models are selling better for that particular brand. In the case of Richard Mille round pieces like the RM28, Diver, or the 32 Chrono, not the most popular watch in the lineup, but they still sell like hotcakes. There's still a demand because people can't get the other ones, and these ones all of a sudden seem like a great deal because you can get somewhat of a discount on them, and all of a sudden your less popular models are selling just the same. If they're profitable at the end of the year, if the brand image is there and the brand overall is popular, it's a win-win for them. Hope that answers your question. I'm going to take one more and finish up this episode. This one comes from Rob S. Roman, what are your thoughts on Konstantin Chaykin's Joker watch? I'm going to throw that up on the screen. The Joker watch was Konstantin's take on the popular character from the Batman movie, Joker. It's a simple watch. It's an ETA-based movement, which he then modified to make his own. And the whole gimmick behind the watch is the expressions that are on the dial of the watch. His take on the moon phase basically depicts a tongue as it moves around the mouth area. At the same token, you have the hours indicated by quote-unquote an eyeball, as well as the seconds on the other side. And as the watch moves around, it depicts, they said, 20-some thousand different facial expressions, I guess, if you do the math and the number of combinations of the moon phase and so on and so forth. Therefore, making it to where every time you look at your watch, it has, quote-unquote, a different facial expression. It's reasonably priced. Konstantin Chaykin being one of those, quote-unquote, independent watchmakers and being Russian, which so am I, so I am kind of biased, but I don't get biased just because he's Russian. I actually do like his watch. I like the fact that it's something different. Again, in the world of horology today, it's very hard to come up with something that's cool and it's different, especially reasonably priced. Oftentimes, companies come out with some sort of a horological feat, which this is not really. This is just a cool way of displaying time and having your watch consistently, perpetually change on you in terms of its overall look. Obviously, it doesn't look like the Joker at a glance when you look at it. It's definitely a conversation piece. But one of the things I liked about it is, again, he did make something different. And he priced it reasonably. In 2017, when he showed the watch in Basel, I think the retail was, don't quote me, it was around 7,000 euros, which today would be about $8,000, which is reasonable. In terms of resale value, I told you guys before, independent watchmakers don't tend to resell well. There's not a whole lot of following out there for Konstantin Chaykin. However, this particular watch, if you manage to get out there and pick it up from somebody at a discount, and let's say the watch is $8,000, I don't know where you can get this watch at a discount. I've never sold one of these, but let's say if you did get it, let's say around $5,000-$6,000, and even if you lost half the value that you paid, you're still not losing an arm and a leg relatively to some of the more expensive pieces. So aesthetically different, love it. The concept of the watch perpetually changing its face in the face that of a Joker from Batman.
I'm Batman.
And the fact that it's reasonably priced makes it a win-win for me as far as I'm concerned. If you want to get out there and buy yourself one of those, definitely do. And then if you do, send me a quick video. I'd love to see it on your wrist. Well, guys, that's it for me today. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget, comment your questions below for the next upcoming episodes, and I'll do my best to try to answer all of them. Meanwhile, if you like this video, don't forget, like, share, subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.